صباح الخير. يسعدني أن أرحب بكم جميعا، أرحب بهذه الكوكبة من الخبراء والعلماء والمثقفين والمهتمين. كان بودي أن أرحب بكم في رحاب معهد فارس للسياسات العامة والعلاقات الدولية، غير أننا سنلتقي بإذن الله غدا في ذلك المكان. أتمنى للإخوة الوافدين إلينا من بلاد قريبة أو بعيدة إقامة طيبة في بيروت، وأتمنى أن يأتي مؤتمركم هذا مثمراً. سأتحدث باختصار باللغة الإنجليزية إذا سمحتم، لكي أشكر في المقام الأول مدير مؤسسة فريدريش إبرت شتيفتونغ الذي تحمل العبء الأكبر وراء تنظيم هذا النشاط، والذي كان صاحب فكرة التئام اجتماعنا هذا. So thank you very much, dear Achim Vogt, for making this possible. I think the idea is yours and much of the work is yours, but we're very pleased to be co-sponsors of this initiative. I believe it's both timely and pertinent. And I'm confident that with a group of experts of this caliber, I'm confident that you'll be able to build on the work you've done 2 years ago in Amman. I have not had a chance to read everything that was produced from that conference, but I look forward to this one. I'll try as much as possible to listen to your deliberations and hopefully look into the publication that will come out of this meeting. I think in this conference you'll be covering a large territory, which is absolutely normal in this case. I'm pleased that some of the participants that come from Germany or beyond will introduce us to concepts that we may not all be familiar with, and therefore we might be able to approach their presentations from, if possible, a comparative approach. I'm very pleased that there are a couple of sessions at the end of this conference that could build on the work that is done by our institute. I'm referring more particularly to sustainable transportation and to climate change. These are two areas where our institute has done a lot of work and might therefore be able to offer a relevant contribution to deliberations. I'm also very, very pleased that you will have a panel of 3 speakers that will present case studies: Byblos, Chefchaouen, and Amman. I wish there were more cities from the Arab world, but this is particularly interesting, as I hope this conference will end up with a number of recommendations. And whatever recommendations we can make on the issue of sustainable cities need not to be abstract, but should build on what have been attempted here and there. Our institute is vocation, and I believe this is to a large extent your vocation as well, is to try and help in translating knowledge produced by experts like your good selves and by university professors and researchers, translate it, make it usable, so to speak, by policymakers and decision makers. Make it perhaps a little more relevant than it looks. In this part of the world, the community of producers of knowledge and the community of political decision makers are far apart. And both communities also look down at each other. Both communities are suspicious of each other. And part of our role, and yours, I believe, is to not to bridge the gap in the superficial sense of the word, but make sure, and I think the initiative should be ours, make sure that what we write, what we research, what we produce is meaningful, is useful, is relevant, and could enlighten those who are called to make decisions on behalf of whether our national communities or our local communities. So I'm hopeful that this conference, although it's structured around presentations and discussions, I hope that in every discussion with a good note taker, we will highlight whatever may look like a recommendation for policymakers. Once again, I welcome you all, and I thank you very much, and I'm pleased that this conference, despite calendar difficulties and last-minute changes in the location, it's that all of you are in the room. I hope tomorrow there'll be more AUB faculty members and students amongst you. Thank you all. You're most welcome in Beirut.
Thank you very much, Tarek Mitri. Thank you also, dear partners of the Climate Change and Environment Program in the Arab world of the Issam Fares Institute at the AUB, dear experts and guests and participants. For me also, it's a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung to this important event towards finding ways toward a roadmap for sustainable cities in the Middle East and North Africa region. And to be honest, I had wanted to thank you because your team of Issam Fares Institute played a great role in making this event happen. So it was to some extent our idea, but it drew actually, as you said, on some of the issues that the Issam Fares Institute has dealt with in the past, and certainly so with regard to sustainable urban transport and other issues like climate change. It's true that this is not the first conference of its kind in the Middle East and North Africa region that is dealing with questions of sustainable or intelligent cities. But many seminars have dealt with the challenges of urban plannings in our region and others, which see an unabated growth in population, increasing congestion and pollution, and where cities have become less livable for its population, or for their population. Many of these conferences in the region, though, especially in the Gulf countries, have dealt with questions of technology and industry, with financial aspects and business perspectives. So our event today and tomorrow is a little bit different, at least for this region, in that it tries to present a more comprehensive approach to the topic. We are aiming, with the support of a number of you experts and of course the audience, to connect all those singular topics to a more coherent approach. And as you have said, in 2012, the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung has already organized the first event of this kind together with the Royal Scientific Society in Jordan and the Innovation Center for Mobility and Societal Change in Berlin at the time. And some of our panelists and participants are actually here again today. And I'm very happy because it should not be a one-time event. It should have follow-ups, and we are aiming to follow up in the future again. The Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, and it's sometimes a bit funny when we are called Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung Foundation, because Stiftung in German means foundation. So we are just FES, or the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung. It's Germany's oldest political foundation, founded as early as 1925, and certainly we didn't have problems of sustainable urban transport at the time. Committed to the values of a social and democratic society, and active in Lebanon for almost 50 years, sees itself as an organization for dialogue and change, and aims for offering a forum of debate among different stakeholders in politics and society. And because of this profile, we have been highly interested to partner in this gathering with the Issam Fares Institute and its climate change and environment program from the very moment that the idea was developed and discussed among our two organizations. We do share with IFI, and Tarek Mitri has just mentioned it a minute ago, and of course with most of you all here, two of the key ideas and pillars of our event today and tomorrow as a joint interest, namely the question of sustainable urban transport and, more generally speaking, the potentially dangerous effects of a non-intelligent and non-sustainable urban development on the environment and climate change, not only in this region. And the interest has, of course, been even higher because the Friedrich-Ebert Foundation is a German foundation, and Germany has gained some reputation for its model of a sustainable environmental and energy policy, for intelligent solutions to questions of urban planning and urban mobility, and for other ways which enable us at the same time to maintain lifestyles, but also to save the planet from climate change, pollution, and the waste of natural resources. The first question for IFI and FAS was, of course, should we call our main topic intelligent or smart cities, or should we call it sustainable cities? And while we certainly need both approaches, IFI and FAS came to the conclusion that sustainable cities is a little bit more suitable for what we would wish to achieve during these 2 days. Yes, a city's governing body can use intelligent technologies, and there can be certainly some progress through the use of smart grids, intelligent mobility systems, green buildings, to name but a few aspects. But at the same time, I think a city can only be as smart as its citizens. It all depends on intelligent strategies implemented by both the decision makers and on the will and capability of the local population to make use of the opportunities and to change long-established behavioral patterns and mentalities. The second and obvious question to ask is, why should we, the citizens, the decision makers, as well as the local population, change our lifestyle and live in a way that might even involve some financial burdens and other inconvenience in the short term? Well, first of all, I think, first and foremost, the problem is that the urban population, the percentage of urban population in the world, will still and further increase in the foreseeable future and in the coming decades. We need small and large cities from Beirut to Casablanca, from Sana'a to Cairo, from Chefchaouen to Jbeil, designed, planned, and managed in a way that will enable us to lead a decent life. And secondly, cities are a principal source of energy consumption, with transport and private households being two of the main origins. Therefore, it is evident that cities and regions have a major role to play when it comes to developing sustainable policies in many related sectors. Now, with the foreseeable urban growth in urban population, globally and specifically in this region, the vulnerability of cities also increases, from congestion to the potential collapse of transport systems, to a lack of energy, water and food security, from health issues due to pollution to the economic burden of a lack of intelligent and sustainable urban planning on the national economy, there are a variety of growing risks that make it a political as well as a socio-economic necessity rather than a luxury to talk about sustainable cities. It's therefore that we have included one panel on resilience building and the new urban nexus, which basically means to develop sustainable, creative and intelligent ways to energy, food and water security, as well as to enable cities to adapt to, prepare for and react to the different climate change related risks and potential disasters. And these two key words have become central in global discussions on sustainable cities in the past few years. Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to this question and this problematic. Every country, every society, and especially every local government and population will have to develop and to decide upon their specific model. And it is therefore that we have invited experts from several countries, from the region, but also from further away, and projects to present their experiences, not only with regard to technological ideas, but also bearing in mind the involvement of society. And I think that is a very crucial point for us. I think it is very hard to understand and even less to accept why, when other regions of the world are actively engaging in the public debate and in the development of strategies and policies, the MENA region, with all its severe challenges, is trailing behind in this regard. If you just take the example of ICLAI, the World Association of Local Governments for Sustainability, and Nicolas Daccio will talk about it a little bit more in detail in a minute. It has more than 1,000 members from around the world, but only 2 from the Middle East and North Africa. And it's easy to conclude, therefore, that there is still a lot of uncharted territory in this regard in this region. And I'm extremely happy, therefore, that one representative of the city of Chefchaouen, which is one of the 2 members of the Arab world in ICLAI, is actually with us and will talk about his and the city's experience. An intelligent and sustainable urban development policy will imply hard work. The expected results will show rather in the long run than in a short-term perspective. The more participation of civil society is integrated in the process, the easier a local sense of ownership will develop. Like with any other political and societal issue, a sustainable and environmentally friendly urban development needs that every citizen has the feeling that he or she can contribute to the development of the city, of his or her neighborhood, and that he or she can participate in deciding upon local or regional issues. This is why we have also included one other panel which will deal with public spaces, a topic very high on the agenda here in Beirut, but certainly as relevant in many other urban agglomerations in the region. Now, Tariq Mitri has applauded us as Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung for the idea and for some of the work that we have done, but I would like to seize the opportunity once again to thank the Issam Fares Institute for being a partner with us in this activity, and I would especially thank Rana El-Haj, Nadim Farajalla, Karim Makdisi, and Patricia, Patricia Haidamous, sorry, this one family name I haven't yet integrated in my head, who have in various capacities made it all possible and made it all happen. From FAS part, I would especially like to thank Feras Khairallah and Stephen Shimko, who have helped a lot in bringing this all together. And I would like, please, with your permission, to thank at this moment, because usually we thank in the end when there are very few participants left. We thank our interpreters who do a tremendous work in translating all these complicated issues from English to Arabic, and I would like to seize the opportunity today to thank them as early as this first morning, and prove me wrong, I think they deserve it. So let me finish by saying that the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung will follow up on this topic with our partners here in Beirut and also others in the region on this topic. We think it's very important for the future of this region, and we will be there, we will be ready to help support initiatives that come up in different countries, be it in the Maghreb or be it in the Mashriq, and we will be there in the following years with you and for you and help. Thanks very much for your attention. Now I have to keep the microphone because we have our first speaker of the morning, and I would like to introduce Nicola Daschio.
Daschio, that's right.
Daschio, that was the better way of pronouncing the name, who has come from Paris, where he is currently working and doing research on issues of urban ecology as a freelance consultant. His expertise includes political-oriented research and stakeholder mobilization with a focus on sustainable mobility and the urban common. He is also a lecturer of urban ecologies at Sciences Po in Paris and works to promote pedestrians' and cyclists' well-being. In the past, he has worked with international institutions, city networks, and NGOs on issues related to the urban environment and sustainable development. His work included research for policy support and stakeholders' engagement in Western Europe, Latin America, and Sub-Sahara Africa. And if I may add that, you have at some point also worked with ICLAI, the World Association of Local Governments for Sustainability. So Nicola, please take the floor. I'm not sure, I think, do you want to stand or?
I could stand, but if there's no microphone, then I'll...
I think we need a mobile microphone, please, for the speaker. Or we could maybe put
Oh, no, the
one.
microphone is there, look.
Or we could put this, that's there. Is it working? One. Should work. You have to take it close. Talking about technology.
I prefer to stand as I'm a teacher. I know that my students fall asleep very quickly if I sit down, and so I want to avoid that at least this morning. So let's start. We are living in our age has been called the urban age. We didn't have time to exchange earlier on, but I understand that we have stakeholders from many different backgrounds, many different disciplines, and wherever your field work is, wherever your field of research is, we heard that. Our world is becoming urban. Some people call it the urban revolution.
Hello.
Mean? Well, more than 50% of the world population lives in cities. This was in 2008, and this percentage is increasing. I just read a few days ago that every minute 141 new inhabitants come on the planet. Well, so by the end of this presentation, more than 4,000 people will be living in our planet, and most of them will be living in cities. In fact, between 2010 and 2050, more than 2.5 billion new urban residents in the world. Basically, sorry, is better? Okay. Virtually the whole population growth that we will see in the next 30 years, 40 years will happen in cities. Not only from the demographic point of view, cities play a protagonist role, also in terms of the economic performance. Look, 80% of the global GDP is produced in cities. And to go further in this direction, 600 richest cities produce 60% of the global GDP. Now, it's difficult to to put the innovation in hard data as these ones, but also in technological innovation, social innovation, cultural innovation happens in cities. And then we can go on, we spoke about demography and economics, we could go on speaking about the landscape. Our world is becoming urban, like the built environment is going beyond the borders that it used to have. We see cities being built everywhere where we would not expect it before. I took this picture here as an example because as a political scientist, I was used to see the planet divided in borders and countries. In these pictures, we don't see borders, we don't see countries, we see cities. Like to show you really how cities play, cities are protagonists. The urban trends are really protagonists in our age. Is this a problem, yes or no? Well, what is certain is that that is happening is a risk. Like it's happening very fast and and has a very high risk factor. What does that mean? Cities are a risk. Cities as risk, even if they only occupy up to 3% of the planet's surface, their ecological footprint is much beyond that. Urban metabolism, which studies precisely the flows that come inside of the city and outside of the city, tells us that a city like London, for example, has an ecological footprint 125 times bigger than its actual surface. That exactly. Cities consume global resources, consume resources which are placed outside of their boundaries, and sinks also by throwing out of the boundaries gas, greenhouse gas emission, waste, and dirty water. On the other hand, if cities are a risk for our planet, here I have the data, sorry. 80% so of the global greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to cities. It has been calculated that 67% of primary energy is consumed in cities, 46% of global waste, and for a total of 75% of the natural resources are consumed in cities. As I was telling you, cities are not only a risk for the planet, but cities are at risk as well. Precisely because they depend on resources so far from their boundaries, cities see their food security, their water security, their energy security at risk. And I think that Beirut is an example. With sometimes I hear there are power cuts or water cuts. This is a picture of Genova, a city in Italy, few weeks ago, being flooded, and with tremendous damages to the city's infrastructure and to the quality of life of the people. Indeed, cities are particularly vulnerable to the natural disasters that are linked to climate change, for example, and flood, cyclones, heat waves are just some of the examples. But why cities are more vulnerable than the rest? Well, because cities are often placed in location particularly vulnerable, along rivers, for example, or on the coastline. And also because cities, well, by nature, they concentrate people and economic activity. So a natural disaster which happened in a city has a much bigger scale. Thirdly, cities, in cities, there is segment of the population particularly vulnerable as poor, like the urban poor or elderly people, which are particularly vulnerable to this disaster. Well, so we see that cities represent a risk for the planet. Cities are at risk, which makes us conclude that the struggle for global sustainability will be won or lost in cities. This is a sentence that Ban Ki-moon has said, but many others, so I didn't put the name because this is a sentence that shows us how cities, acting in cities will make a difference in the global sustainability challenge. So what do we need to do? What do we need? We need really to turn upside down the approach we have to urban development. And so we need to have an approach toward more sustainable cities. This is why stakeholders, from international organization to grassroots association, work and talk and do research on approaches to sustainable cities. This is why this conference is happening. But all over the world, there are more and more initiatives to produce more sustainable cities. My role here, I believe, is to explain a bit what is what does that mean, sustainable cities? Well, I think there are at least two ways to define sustainable cities. Cities as a place of sustainability, and cities as a tool for sustainability. So first of all, cities as a place. I think we are all aware of the concept of sustainable development, which is an approach to development that aims to improve the quality of life of people by keeping in mind the environmental, economic and social dimension of development. Well, a sustainable city is a city that characterized by a quality of life which takes into account the economic, the environmental, and the social pillar of sustainable development. What does that mean? A city with green urban economy, with the, productive activities taking place, with jobs and an income level which is adequate for everybody to sustain an adequate living standard, where innovation takes place. A sustainable city is also a city with smart infrastructure, first of all, with infrastructure which exists, and then which is smart, which is effective to ensure that the economy and the people are well sustained by infrastructure to circulate water, energy, mobility, and so on. A sustainable city is a city which takes into account where the economic activities do not degrade the quality of the environment, both inside of the city, and I'm talking about the quality of the air, for example, or of the water, but also outside of the city. A sustainable city is a city which does not, which has a low level of carbon per economic activity. Fourth, a sustainable city is a city where the first three pillars are fairly shared among the whole population. We cannot think of a sustainable city of a city where only half of the population has regular access to water. A sustainable city is a city which is equal, where everybody, all citizens have access to resources, to infrastructure, but also to opportunities to improve their quality of life. And then finally, urban resilience. A sustainable city is a city where all the prosperity that the city has achieved is not at risk just because of natural disaster that can happen once a year or once every 10 years. But we cannot, like a sustainable city is a city that takes into account this risk and manages and organizes the city and the population accordingly. Now, if a city is for sure a location, like geographically, like we can promote sustainable development in cities by achieving these 5 pillars, research says more and more that cities are also a tool for sustainability, which goes much beyond their border. If like a sustainable cities contributes actively to sustainable development inside of the city, in the region, in the country, and worldwide. What do I mean by that? If we go back and we look at the 3 pillars of sustainable development, well, cities have been seen as drivers of economic growth. Just before I showed you that they produce 80% of GDP. This is because if we look at the subsistence countries where agriculture is the main activities, well, then the best if the population is dispersed throughout the country. Well, for industrial and service-oriented development, cities or the urban agglomeration is the best opportunity. Why? Because activities come together, they can take advantage of the economies of scale that happens in city with and specialization as well, with low transport and transaction cost. This is what urban economists call the benefits of matching, sharing, and learning. This is matching jobs with people, sharing of expensive infrastructure, and learning from each other. This is very visible or tangible in industrial at the industrial level of development, but it's also like for services. There's more and more research that shows that urbanization does not follow economic development, but is a tool for economic development. So let's look at the second pillar, so social development. Cities can be a stage for social opportunity. Why? Because of the wealth of what we call the urban commons. Because in cities, everybody has an easier access, or can have an easier access to education or to health services. And this is crucial. to promote social development for everybody. Finally, cities can be champions of environmental protection. It's true that cities, as I told you before, are a risk for the planet, but they can be also the place where per capita carbon emissions are lower. Why? Because the energy and material needs of network infrastructure and of transportation is lower in more dense agglomeration. And this is also because in cities you find a good scale for technological innovation to take place with initiatives such as the waste to energy initiatives or the combined heat generation. But I want to highlight, I put cities can be drivers, cities can be stages, cities can be champions, because this is not automatic. For this to happen, cities need sound governance, sound management. One more thing about sustainability. Well, the whole narrative of sustainable development speaks about the well-being and the possibilities of future generations, which is true. Like, the reason why we are promoting sustainable development is because we care about the possibilities of future generation. At the same time, in cities, at least, which is the field I know, sustainability has a lot to do with the quality of life of cities today. Investment in sustainable cities for sure have an effect in the long run, but they also address problems, very, very current problems. And the easiest one to see is congestion related to transport, like the mobility sector. Sustainable cities have an impact today on the population today. And this is, I think, crucial to understand the topic of sustainable cities. Now, precisely, a roadmap toward sustainable cities. What do we need to build sustainable cities? What is the good strategy towards sustainable cities? Well, before answering to this question, there are at least two things which we shall specify. First of all, sustainable cities is not a status, is not a final goal. There's no sustainable city as such. This is a process. Is an approach to urban governance, to urban management, toward sustainable cities. I think that the best wording would be ecological urbanism, because it's a lot about producing sustainable cities more than having sustainable cities. And then the second one, and those who study, urban affairs will understand very well, and geography. Well, cities around the world are all different, so we cannot figure out one strategy towards sustainable cities. We can understand what are the main issues at stake, but of course, building a sustainable city has a lot to do with understanding the local culture, the local history, the local political and economic structure. Now, to answer to this question, then, once we agree on these two main points, exactly, I want to introduce the work of ICLEI. This is a local, an association of more than 1,000 local governments, which works I'm gonna say the works of ICLEI in few words. So please, if you have questions, you can ask, because it's a very old organization, it's more than 20 years old, and it's a network of local governments, which purpose is precisely to connect leaders, because so they to connect leaders precisely. More than 1,000 mayors are part of the association to build capacity through workshops, through research, and also through peer learning, which is crucial. Precisely, a leader, like a mayor in Beirut, which is that a certain initiative has taken place in Amman, will learn what worked, what didn't work, and what he shall do to make it work in Beirut. And then finally, ICLEI represents the voice of cities. Back in the past, until I would say 10 or 15 years ago, in the international debate, it was only about national government speaking. Well, now with ICLEI, as well as the other city networks, because ICLEI is definitely like a leader in this sense, but it's not the only one. Cities and local government have a voice in international debate, and the local agenda can be put forward thanks to the power of number, because one mayor alone, of course, doesn't have the same voice of them all together. Well, from the work of ICLEI, I took 3 examples of successful or on the way to be successful sustainable cities, Why? Because I want to share with you these 3 examples, because I think they, the 3 of them identify 3 ingredients or three typical characteristics which I believe are necessary for a sustainable city to be built. So the first one, well, sorry, this is the website. Well, ICLEI, when it was founded in 1992, ICLEI was the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. However, throughout his history, they understood that it's not, the environmental pillar is not the only one which is important for a city. And so this is why they changed into local government for sustainability. However, you know, the power of branding and so on, people knew ICLEI already for its name. So now the complete name is Local Government for Sustainability, and then ICLEI is an acronym which is not really used anymore as such. Exactly, so we were talking about 3 characteristics, 3 ingredients which make a sustainable city successful. Well, I think that the first important ingredient is a city has visionary, and I would even add ambitious leaders. And I don't only talk about institutional leaders. So it's not only about the mayor or the national institution. No, a city needs ambitious leaders in the academia, in the civil society, in the business sector as well. And what does it mean to be a visionary leader? Well, to understand that, let's make the difference between, you know, managers and leader. A manager, even if he's a good manager, his goal is to get at the end of the year, right? To make his normal business and to try to make it good and to make it to survive until the end of the year. Well, a leader is somebody who has a vision for the long term, which is able to change. And for sustainable cities, it's not enough to do what we're doing now, but just a bit better. No, we need really an approach which is completely different, which is really revolutionary. In the picture, this is the mayor of Suwon in South Korea, which last year exactly has, last year has organized together with ICLEI precisely and the United Nations UN Habitat, the United Nations Program for Urban Development, has organized the Ecomobility World Festival. The rule of the festival was 1 month, 1 neighborhood, no cars. Meaning that, but in fact, like the word no cars doesn't really explain what happened. For 1 month in the city of Seoul, in 1 neighborhood, they put out all of the cars, and they bring in bicycle, public transport, infrastructure, smart mobility, as well as social activities, street festival, and so on. This is a picture, I don't know if it's clear, from it's the same street, it's the very same street, before and after. So the purpose of the festival was to show, to prove that our cities, which today are definitely car dependent, can look like something else. Konrad Zimmermann, which used to be ICLEI Secretary General and was one of the mind behind this festival, once told me, look, in Germany, where he comes from, but it's not only in Germany, in Italy we have the same, some cities organize Middle Ages festival. So for 1 month in a neighborhood, people dress up like knights or princesses, and you see around how the city used to be in the past. Well, through the festival, they want to show how a city can look like in the future. Knowledge is limited by imagination, and then the purpose of these initiatives is precisely to show, to spread the knowledge of a different approach, and therefore to allow people to imagine, to think about a city without cars. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in Beirut, sometimes they do a Sunday without car. Well, the difference is that in a month, you cannot simply postpone the activities. You need to find a solution. You need to find an alternative to car use. Now, typical objection is, what do the residents think about that? What do the local business think about that? In fact, a crucial part of this Ecomobility World Festival, which took place like 18 months before the festival, was precisely a negotiation, an engagement with the local stakeholders. And a lot of them, I have to say, I saw the videos of the manifestation, were against it to begin with. But the day before the festival, they did a survey, and 70% of the people who were against the festival were happy, understood the spirit of the festival, and were happy to put cars outside for a month and bring inside everything else. And so this brings me to the next pillar, which is the engagement, the active engagement of all stakeholders. I'm not the first one to say it here. My colleagues have said it before. It is crucial for sustainable cities to happen to have every stakeholders engaged. What does that mean? It means to engage the business sector, to engage the academia precisely. The research is very important. It's very important the research actors are on board. Civil society associations, international organizations shall be on board to produce sustainable cities. Why? Well, there are many reasons, but I want to tell you 2 reasons why this is important. The first one is that every actor, every stakeholders can bring in a different resource. Can bring in money, which is crucial, political legitimacy, which is also very important, but also knowledge about a specific area. For example, I am sure that engineers are very well off to build a cycleway, but I am a cyclist and I know that what I know about the way a cycleway shall be built is also very important to complement the knowledge of engineers. This is why bringing on board many different stakeholders can bring in resources, financial resources, political resources, but also knowledge resources on board. And then the second reason why it is important, well, because this ensures political sustainability. If you bring on board all the stakeholders, you are sure that they will like what you're going to do. You don't risk to make something which will may make your popularity being lost. I mean, it's important to bring stakeholders on board precisely because then you do something and you agree with them, and they will not be able to tell you 1 year later, no, this is not what we like, and will not buy in. Okay, so here I have an example from Germany, from the city of Bottrop, which is a good example of how active engagement of all stakeholders is good to reduce the carbon footprint of the cities. Well, in 2010, a consortium of about 70 business, so it started in the business sector, came together and to understand how to work toward a sustainable city. The local government understood that this was a good momentum and made up a company where this consortium was on board, an energy company was on board, a consultancy company was on board, and of course the local government. And then what they did was to try to figure out a good plan for the city to be more carbon efficient. And so they engaged all the citizens that came together to workshops and so on to identify more than 300 projects to reduce the carbon emission of 7 neighborhoods in the area. And then especially they founded a scientific committee engaging the local university as well as national ones precisely to make sure that the science was also on board and that the finding and the production was scientifically sound. Third pillar, and I need to rush a bit because I see that the time is going over, is for a sustainable to build a sustainable city, you need a comprehensive approach in all stakeholders. In this picture, you see energy, food, and water, but I also want to include waste, transportation, and so on. It's important to bring all this sector on board because this is much more efficient. This is much more, you don't risk to take a solution for one problem and create another problem somewhere else. So a good example in this is Curitiba. And I took Curitiba because it is an example of the 70s and the 80s. So we are sure today that it worked. It's not some city which is trying now. So we know that after, how much is it, 40 years, we know that it worked. Well, Curitiba had different problems. Twice a year, they were flooded. The transport network was really bad. The natural capital was being damaged, and so on. The urban poor were squatting new areas in hazard-prone areas. And so what the city did, well, you only see two solutions here, precisely because the city only took 2 solutions. The first one was the river corridor. So instead of building canals to build the flood infrastructure, they built a network of 28 parks throughout the city with retention ponds, precisely to welcome the flood, to make sure that the flood would not go in habitat area. And these parks, they had recreational initiatives as well as cultural activities. So at the same time, they managed to reduce flood risk and they provided recreation and cultural activities for the city. But then you will imagine what is the problem, that the people who were living there, both urban poor squatting there as well as landowners, they wanted to have something in exchange. How to give them something in exchange without paying too much money? Well, the city built the transit corridor, meaning like along 5 axes, they developed in a really pioneer way the transportation framework, transportation system of the city, creating in a way new areas with high development potential. And so along the new bus, they created new areas very well connected and so very high value. So the taxes for the city increased, like the tax revenue increased, and at the same time, the people who were displaced, they could find a house and business opportunity in a zone of the area quite very valuable. So to conclude, we saw that cities are a risk for the planet, and cities are at risk as well. So we need more sustainable cities. We need a new approach to urban development. So we see that sustainable cities, they have now for today and for tomorrow, ecologic, social, and economic benefit. It's not like it's a win-win situation. And so what do we need to get there? We need visionary leaders. We need to engage all stakeholders. We need a comprehensive approach of including all urban sectors. And so I think if we bring together these 3 things, we can figure out in the next days more concrete actions, more specific policy action which are suitable here for this area and this country.